Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
It is time. We have reached the division series. I'm excited about this. October baseball. It does not get much better. And that's why we're going to be talking about it here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast and the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley. It is October 6th, Tuesday, October 6th, as of this recording. About 5 o'clock Central Time for me right now. We have some baseball games, one going on, one that's completely done. The Braves have already taken down the Marlins in Game 1 of their Division Series matchup, 9-5. At the time, the Astros are currently leading the Oakland A's. We'll see if that continues on the further we get into recording. We have so much to talk about. October baseball doesn't get much better. We're down to our final 8 teams. We got to get you up to date on everything. We're definitely going to be talking about news and noise, about any injuries that we have to discuss, mainly having to do with how some Division Series rosters are being constructed. We have some guys that have been added, some that have been kept off. Definitely some big news there. I want to take some time to look at each of these series and talk about, hey, what needs to happen for these 8 teams if they are going to win? If they are going to move on to the championship series, what's going to be the big reason why? We're going to take some time to look at what I think would be some of the more fun World Series matchups. It's going to be fun. We'll discuss about that a little bit more, but I'm going to be taking more into account not just how good the team was this year, but also I like some storylines. I like some drama. I like a lot of things involved in there. And then lastly, in our last segment, we're going to talk about it a little bit deeper when we get there, but I want to talk about players potentially to be claimed after a team loses in the playoffs. It was a fun tweet that was sent out. It was going across Twitter, and I love the idea of it, so I wanted to talk about it. It was definitely a fun conversation to be had. But we're going to start things off with some news and noise, getting caught up on all MLB teams, but we're actually focusing in a little bit more on our postseason teams as well. One big thing that happened, we talked about it, the Braves already took Game 1 from the Marlins 9-5, and something that was really big what happened to do with the Marlins is Starling Marte being left off the 28-man roster of the Miami Marlins for their Division Series matchup with the Braves. Center fielder was injured when he was hit in the hand by a pitch thrown by Dan Winkler of the Chicago Cubs in Game 1 of the Marlins win in the wild card round. Marte was diagnosed with a fracture in his left hand, and he remained on the roster for Miami as they won Game 2 and ended up moving past the Cubs, but he was not used. It was something that they were very concerned about. They weren't comfortable putting him back out there, and so they decided that they're not going to put him on the Division Series lineup as well, which is a big hit to their offense considering how big of an acquisition he was at the trade deadline. He was a great player for the Diamondbacks. Marlins think they needed to add to their offense, so they went and got Marte. It was a good move for them. Instead, it looks like we're going to have Magneuris Sierra start in center field for maybe a couple games. He started Game 1. We'll see if he starts again Game 2. The Marlins also added some pitchers to their roster for the wild card round, including left-handed starter Daniel Castano and right-handed reliever Nick Vincent. Left-handed reliever Stephen Tarpley was left off of the roster as well, with Mattingly citing that the right-handed slate that the Atlanta Braves offense was kind of bringing is a big reason why he was being left off. Wanted to try to play some matchups as well, so it was a big bullpen switch for them. The Braves ended up deciding they're going to go with 15 pitchers, 13 players. We were actually seeing a few teams ended up going with more pitchers than players, getting to be reliant on maybe pulling the plug on some starters a little bit sooner in games. We'll see, though. There's a lot that can be happening there. But that's some big news coming from the Marlins camp. Marte, for sure, going to be missed. The next thing that we have, well, Mike Clevenger. This was some exciting news coming out of San Diego. Mike Clevenger was put on the Padres Division Series roster, and he is expected to start Game 1. Now, this is something to monitor. Really going to be something to watch closely because he's probably going to be on some sort of pitch count, some sort of watch. He hasn't pitched in a few days, at least seen very much live competition. So I highly doubt he's going to get 3 times through the Dodgers lineup for a couple of reasons. One, the Dodgers lineup is really good, and two, just the conditioning. Probably going to be playing it very safe with him. Now, while Clevenger was put on the roster, Danielson Lamet was left off again. He wasn't on the wild card. He was a big-time pitcher for the Padres this year. Clevenger and Lamet both got hurt in their regular season starts, their final ones, and they weren't on the roster, like we said, against the Cardinals. So that's some big decisions that were left there for sure. I'm going to believe that the Padres are ecstatic that they have Clevenger to help them out. Now, they really worked wonders with their pitching against the Cardinals. They had one really good bullpen game. Zach Davies got roughed up a little bit. I mean, Paddock he had some issues as well. Trying to get any pitching help is what exactly the Padres are wanting. They think their offense is starting to click a little bit again, get heated up. So any help they can get from the mound is going to be huge for them. And I definitely think, I got to feel that Clevenger's going to surprise a little bit. Could very much be wrong when this gets released tomorrow. But it's definitely going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch going forward. Talking about the team that they are going to be playing, well, the Dodgers added right-handed reliever Dylan Floro and infielder Gavin Lux to the roster for their division series. And this becomes big moves. They removed Edwin Rios and their third-string catcher, Keibert Ruiz. Now, losing the catcher is not a big loss for them. Rios had been, around the team a lot, but Gavin Lux was the guy that a lot of people thought early on was going to be Rookie of the Year favorite in the National League. Didn't make the opening day roster, got brought up later, but it's still a little bit of a surprise. Rios being a power hitter, you wonder. Offense is something that you're going to need here a little bit against this Padres lineup. So they really think they have something for Lux. Now, Rios appeared in Game 1 against the Brewers, went 0 for 3 with a walk and a strikeout, didn't play in Game 2. We don't know if this has anything to do with injuries or the fact that the Dodgers are just going with Lux because they think that he's going to be the better bat right now. It's a move to definitely keep our eyes on. Surprising. The story of Gavin Lux this year all around has been just very odd from what we were expecting, from what reports, potential, just everything. We really don't know what to think about a lot of this. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see where this goes. He might not even get much play. Who knows? It's going to be a lot that can happen here. We'll keep our eyes on it and see what happens. Some other big news today. And, you'll have more information tomorrow after the game is over. But manager Aaron Boone has decided to turn to his rookie, Deivi Garcia, the 21-year-old, to start Game 2 for the Yankees. Taking on the Tampa Bay Rays, the Yankees up 1-0 in the series. He's going to be the youngest player to make a postseason start in New York Yankees franchise history. 21 years old, 140 days. Like we said, leading 1-0 in the best-of-5 series after the Yankees won 9-3 on Monday. Only has 6 major league starts under his belt, but Aaron Boone said he opted to go with Garcia due to the maturity he has displayed this season. And it's a big call. It's a big call. And Boone had even said, they deliberated a lot on who is going to throw. It looks like Tanaka is going to go Game 3. I mean, obviously Cole was going to go Game 1. It just seems interesting. I'll leave it at that. And it could be the right move. Either way, I'm not going to knock the Yankees really for doing it, considering the fact that the Rays are a very good team. So if they hit Garcia around, who's to say that they wouldn't have hit around Tanaka a little bit? You never really know. It's just newsworthy considering how young he is. And a lot of people just are going to talk about it and say, hey, maybe we should have held him off a little bit, but we'll see how he does. It could be the right decision. He might have the offense to carry him anyways. A lot of things could happen here. We'll see where it goes. Some other news having to do away from the actual baseball field has to do with Theo Epstein deciding to be stepping away, or at least out of, the Cubs' main GM spot, and he wants to stay in the front office. Now, me as a Red Sox fan, I have to give Theo Epstein a little bit of praise because he did some great things for the Boston Red Sox, and then he went over to Chicago, was a big part in winning their World Series, broke two big curses in baseball. So he's entering the final year of his contract with the Cubs, his 10th overall with the team. He's been there for quite some while. President of Baseball Operations. Sorry, I said GM before, but official title, President of Baseball Operations. He has a belief that about a decade of service time for the organization might be enough for him. He thinks change will be good, especially after a significant amount of time. He's not making any clear statements on what he's going to do, what he's going to transition to. Maybe he even leaves the Cubs. Who knows? He is quoted to say he's not running away from anything. He's invested in the Chicago Cubs. Same investment that he's been for the last 9 years. It's just looking like a change will be coming for Epstein and Chicago. What exactly it will be, that's to be determined at this point. But it's on the horizon, especially for a Chicago Cubs team that's got a lot of decisions to be made. A lot of roster moves, a lot of roster decisions. Whoever is going to step into the role and be the man making a lot of calls is going to have an interesting offseason coming their way. And at least early indications make it look like it's not going to be Theo. So we'll see what happens to him. But like I said, I got to give him praise. As a Red Sox fan, he has done some great things in the game of baseball for two very historic franchises. You got to give him props for what he has for a career. So that's going to be it for our news and noise. Talking about some of the big things going on in baseball right now. Hey, the injury news, down. Love to see that, especially the postseason. You don't want that to be a big part of why teams are winning and losing. But with that said, we got a lot less teams to cover, so it goes a little bit quicker, so that's all right. We are going to be jumping into our next segment, which has to do with, hey, your team, or maybe one of these 8 teams you're just rooting for, what do they need to win and move on in the playoffs? Coming up next on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Say it really is interesting to see how a lot of these teams are constructing their final lineups going into the division series. What do they find to be most important? What are they confident in their roster? You definitely see what a lot of these teams find valuable. And the use of pitchers just seems to be across the board, obviously, something big. You're pitching, you want it to be great in the postseason. You kind of think that a lot of these teams believe in their offense. I mean, you don't just get here with a bad offense. That usually doesn't happen very often. So having a versatile arsenal of arms is kind of a nice thing to help yourself out, whether it be your starters or the back end of your bullpen. You definitely want to be ready for a lot of different situations. Definitely interesting to see. But I do want to dive into a little bit deeper of in these division series. I asked myself the question as I looked at all 8 of these teams. How do they win? What needs to happen for these teams to move on? And I ended up jotting down just a little bit of notes of what I think needs to happen for all 8 of these teams. And I kind of started just breaking it down series by series. So I stuck with my list of what I thought was the most interesting series from least to most interesting. The least interesting series, at least in my mind, looking at them, even though I think they're all going to be great, is Braves Marlins. And I felt like this one was pretty clear cut on what's going to be the difference maker in a lot of this. For the Braves, their offense just needs to flat out come alive. We know their offense is loaded. Loaded. These guys know how to put runs on the board. They have a trio of hitters in Acuna, Freeman, and Ozuna that are just outstanding offensive bats. They put up 348 runs this year for a reason. That's second in the National League. Second in the National League, but also second in the MLB. They are one of the best offenses in baseball, and it really, really, really shows. If their offense comes alive, that's them attacking the strength of what the Marlins have coming into this, and that's some young and electrifying starting pitchers. So if they're getting what they're consistent with from the season, I think they're going to feel pretty confident moving forward in this series. And now they got 9 runs in game 1, so that was a good showing for them. Their offense coming alive right away. Acuna continuing to look great. Got to be one of the best power leadoff hitters we've ever seen, for sure. And the thing is, you want that offense because obviously you want to complement their top starters. They've been getting good production throughout the year from Max Fried and Ian Anderson. They had battled keeping healthy starters out there. It was just a fight, a struggle when it comes to the Atlanta Braves. But they got 2 guys that are doing some great things. How they are going to manage game 3, game 4, game 5 if they happen, it's going to be interesting to watch. But if their offense is there, giving them the support they need, that's going to be the reason they move past the Marlins. That's going to be the reason that they go on to the championship series. Now, for the Marlins, they're the exact flip side. They need their young starting pitchers to dominate. What happened to them and the Cubs? Alcantara and Sixto Sanchez were great in 2 games, and they moved by Chicago. I look at their offense, especially with Starling Marte being down, and I'm just saying, any of you guys give me something, awesome. We'll put some runs on the board. We'll fall back on our pitching to get us through this. It looked early on in their game against the Braves like that potentially could happen. They put runs on the board first. They were up, I believe it was 4-1, but they weren't able to stop the Braves in game 1. So they have a bunch of guys. They're a fun team to watch. They have a bunch of guys that can just surprise you from game to game. Have a couple hits, put a few runs on the board. I don't really believe in any of them very consistently. I mean, Jesus Aguilar was an okay bat for him. Cooper was, he's been all right for them so far. Anderson has been awesome, batting .750 so far in the playoffs. I mean, he's hitting the ball like crazy in this series. Rojas had a big home run today. I mean, I just don't know if I trust one fully. But with that said, I'm still going to fall back on it's going to be their pitching. Alcantara went 6 innings today, but 5 earned runs aren't going to cut it. He was looking good for about, 4 2/3. I think that's right before things started to get a little messy for him. It needs to be consistent. And if the Marlins want to come back in this series, it's going to be up to Sixto to turn things around for them in the next game. So that's what we're looking at for the Braves and Marlins. For our next series, Astros and A's. Well, the Astros, they just need the star revival. We know players on their team that have been good for quite some time. We know Springer, Altuve, Brantley, Bregman, Correa. We know these guys are good. There's no surprise there. But they need to come back and be playing like the studs that we know them to be. Pitching is going to be a struggle for Houston, but if they're getting the offense from the guys that we know they have, the capabilities that they have, they're going to be able to overcome their pitching. They really are, because just going down that list of names, it is so much better than what they played like in the 60-game stretch of the regular season. The nice thing about a postseason, it's almost like starting fresh. It may not feel it, but that's the reality. Everything you do in the postseason could negate everything that you had that went wrong for you in the regular season. It really could. So we'll see what happens with the Astros. The thing is, that's what they need. Their stars to have a revival. That happens, the Astros very much could move past Oakland. For Oakland, their strength all season, bullpen, defense. That's been their thing. If they lose either of those, they are in trouble. You have to continue to have your strengths moving forward. Their offense is going to give enough. It's going to give enough, and they have a list of guys that as well, they're going to be giving something throughout. Marcus Semien, he's going to give something. La Stella, the trade piece they got halfway through the year, he's going to do something. Pinder's going to do something. You just know. Even Chris Davis, who's, up and down and so, he's having himself a good postseason so far. He's got 2 home runs in the postseason. He's doing something for this team. Matt Olson, want that average obviously to come up, but he's a power guy. And then Sean Murphy, the catcher, is someone that a lot of people are excited about. They're going to get their offense sprinkled in. They're like the Marlins, but better, obviously, offensively. But it's just going to be somebody else. It's going to switch around each game. There's not one guy that you're going to be pointing the finger at and he's like, you have to bring it every single time. But if their defense and their bullpen are slipping at all in this series, I very much worry that the Astros are going to walk away with this. Because, those are those things. They counter each other out. If their stars are hitting for the Astros, that tells me that the bullpen of the pitching for the A's was not doing well. So that's what I see has to happen for the Astros and A's. Star revival for the Astros. A's defense and bullpen needs to continue to be solid. Moving on to the Rays and Yankees. The Yankees ended up taking game 1, a big win for them. The Yankees, we know what they are. We know what the talent is. It's so funny to look at this matchup because I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. We knew the Rays were going to be a good team this year. That didn't surprise anybody. Winning the American League East surprised. But if you paid enough attention, you understood the Yankees were not healthy. They just were not. Even with their awful record against playoff teams, they really were not healthy this season. But it's looking like they are finally clicking as the full potential team we thought they could be. If their offense is here, good luck stopping it. The interesting decision on who Aaron Boone is starting in game 2, it may not matter. It truly may not matter because that offense for the Yankees is that good. Stanton, Judge, if those guys are hitting, LeMahieu, Voit, everyone's hitting, I might be able to go pitch for him. That backing, when you have that offense behind you, it's so much easier to pitch. That in the back of your mind. It's so much easier. It's incredible how much you don't think about it sometimes, and you do better because you know you have guys that are going to put runs on the board for you. It's awesome. And so I stand by that. If the offense is here, if all these guys are healthy, it's not going to be easy to stop the Yankees. It's just not going to be it. And the fact that it's neutral site on top of it, it makes you feel for the Rays a little bit because they've earned this top seed, but they really don't have any advantage to it. For the Rays, though, if they want to beat the Yankees, if they want to stop the Yankees, it's flat out going to be their starting pitchers have it. Their stuff is there. Now, game 1 wasn't quite there. What wasn't quite there, that's for sure. 9-3 loss is not something that you want to see. Came down to it. Blake Snell had 5 innings, gave up 4 earned runs. Now, obviously, it went to the bullpen, but 4 earned runs out of 5 innings for Blake Snell most times is not going to be enough in the postseason. You don't want to see that. But we don't know what we're going to see from them going forward. Now, having Glasnow and Charlie Morton as your guys to fall back on as your next starters, that's nice. Tyler Glasnow could help you save a series, get it back to even, and things could be okay. But it's going to fall a lot on that starting pitching, and the bullpen needs to succeed as well. The Tampa Bay Rays have a great bullpen. They really do. This is the series where we're actually truly testing the two sides of baseball against each other. A great offense versus some great pitching. It makes it a very fun series, and whichever side wins out, that's going to be the team that moves on. Pitching, it looks like it's going to be the Rays. Offense, it's going to be the Yankees. I think that's just the easiest way to break that series down. So we'll see where that one goes. Excited for Game 2 tonight. Really, really, really looking forward to that. And then our very last series, Padres, Dodgers. Padres, they need their offense to not be slowed down. Now, they have enough guys to make it go. Tatis, Machado, Hosmer, Myers, Grisham, they have the guys. Their offense needs to keep clicking. And I'm falling back on, they may not have the best pitching situation in the world, but they get something. And when it comes down to the Padres, they were great with using their pitching in the first series when they needed to get really smart with it against the Cardinals. That Game 3 was a work of beauty, what they did. What they get in this next round is going to be important. Zach Davies needs to bounce back. Clevenger needs to give you something in Game 1. Paddock needs to bounce back. Try your hardest to get to that bullpen. Hand it off to Pomerantz, hand it off to Rosenthal with a lead. Their offense is capable of doing some great stuff. Get to your bullpen with a lead. Your offense cannot be stopped. Don't let it slow down. That's going to be the big thing for this Padres team. Offense needs to keep clicking. And for the Dodgers, they're similar in the sense that everything needs to be working. I worry about them coming out of their first round win against the Brewers. Now, they made quick work. They won in 2 games. But watching those games really didn't feel like they won either of them in commanding style. Now, the Dodgers could be maybe not challenged. Maybe they just knew they were better than the Brewers and it was never really a game. But coming out of that, I left there going, okay, your pitching looked good. Your starters did fine. Your bullpen was phenomenal. But only 3 runs and only 4 runs. A 3-run win and a 2-run win has me a little nervous considering the fact that Mookie Betts was kind of the big reason why in both games. The rest of that offense needs to show up in this next round. And that's why I literally have it written down here. Everything is working. I left that first round going, okay, the Dodgers pitching did okay. Offense, I thought they were a little better than that. I thought it was going to be easier for them. But at the same time, I have to be realistic and well in saying it is the postseason. It is the postseason. But I do have my concerns. I would pick the Dodgers to win this series, but I do have my concerns moving forward. So that's what I'm looking at. If your team or the team you're rooting for, or maybe just the team you're watching, how do they win? That's what I have for those 8 teams. So fun to talk about. We're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about how about some World Series matchups. Yeah, let's dive into that. That sounds like a fun thing to talk about here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
The reality of something that I need to say and need to bring up, when it comes to championships, I don't know if I'm in a minority or majority for this. I really don't know. But something that I absolutely love, whether it be NBA, MLB, NFL, whatever, I don't care. I love seeing a new champion year to year. Dynasties can be great for sports. They really can, because they can drive up ratings because people want to see them win, lose, whatever side you're on, but there's more of a fire and more of a passion. But me personally, I love seeing the competitiveness in these sports. I love seeing a new team come out on top every year just to prove and show how hard it truly is to win titles. How hard it truly is. And so something that has me very excited about this season, even though I would have loved to see this Nationals team with some of their young players and great pitching in the postseason, is that we are going to have a new World Series champion. And it got me thinking, got me wondering, what do I think would be some of the best World Series matchups for this year? Now, I have to be honest. We all know who the top teams are. We know when it comes to record, Dodgers in the National League, Rays in the American League. I get that. That might be quote unquote your best, or maybe some of these other teams where their offense is really clicking. But I like to look beyond just records. I like the drama. I like the storylines. I like having a little background history between some of these guys. There's some great stuff that I love to see that just brings a new element to some of these series. Something I loved reading about, there was an article on MLB.com, it was well written, about, just the little tension, the little history between all of these division series, and it brought up stuff, whether it was from this season or a couple seasons ago, things that have been happening. That little edge, because it's something I like to look for in these series. I like the story that makes it more compelling. So I went ahead and I looked right away at what series do I think I would be most excited to watch. And now I'm going to watch anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. But I did have fun thinking about this. And as someone who works in a little bit of a media platform, I know the one that's going to get the ratings that I know the MLB and all national media would love to see. And let's just get this one out of the way, because just be honest, Dodgers-Yankees would be a big draw. A big draw. And you don't even have to talk about this at just the idea of their big markets. Yes, Los Angeles and New York are massive markets. We get it. But they also might bring the two best offenses to the World Series here. The Dodgers have been dominant start to finish on the season. Even with my concerns in their first round matchup, gotta be realistic with them. Gotta be realistic. They flat out score runs, and their pitching does fine. They've been a dominant performer, and there's a reason they have the best record in the MLB this year. Now, the Yankees are a team that has been up and down, wavering, but we know when that offense is healthy, it can be as good as it gets. So give me that type of matchup. Give that to me. I would love to see two high-flying offenses going at each other like that. I don't know how that gets more exciting. Baseball, as I love pitching. I mean, I was a pitcher. I get it. A great pitcher dealing is exciting to watch. But at the same time, the overall We love to see runs scored. We love to see it. I've had people joke with me before, and I say, let's be real. As much as I love seeing a good pitcher, we don't have a pitching contest at the All-Star weekend. We have a home run derby. Why? Because we want to see these guys hit. That's reality. So I want to be honest with that and say, hey, Dodgers, Yankees, putting these two offenses on the field at once, that would be exciting to see. And I could stick around with that same idea because I have one other matchup here that's written down that would be really, really, really great as well. Follows a lot of the same outlines there, is that Braves Yankees would be fun. Obviously turns into a lot of East Coast instead of bringing more people into it. But I mean, that's another great offense. Now the Braves are focused more around, top trio compared to maybe their lineup not being as deep as the Dodgers. But at the same time, it follows a similar, mold. We would see two really good offenses going at each other, and it would make it a fun World Series just because of that. So I would like to throw Braves Yankees in there along with Dodgers Yankees. Very, very similar, but I think Dodgers Yankees would just be a little bit higher on my list of what I'd like to see. The next one that I'd like to bring in, I mean, do I really need to explain this one? I don't think I do, but Dodgers Astros would be great. If you're new to baseball, there was this little scandal that went down, and Dodgers players haven't taken too kindly to that. Yeah, I love the idea of seeing Joe Kelly on the mound in a World Series versus the Astros. And he would love nothing more to be striking everybody out. We might see him throw some of the hardest baseballs ever. There's so much drama that would be there. And what adds to this is Carlos Correa started talking, bringing more attention to this Astros team after they beat the Twins. It was almost like they snuck into the playoffs. Yeah, we knew this scandal happened, but it felt a little forgotten about, and people were kind of like, yeah, whatever, they're not going to make it. Well, they're playing well now. They took game 1 versus Oakland. At the time where I'm recording, it's the 7th inning. They are up on Oakland 5-2. We'll see if that continues on. You don't know, but I don't know if we'd ever see so many people rooting for the Dodgers if this happened. I really don't know. And the drama and the story and just the competitive fire, I don't know if it would be at any higher of a level. I don't know if I could pick another matchup that it would be any better. I really don't. I think Dodgers Astros would be the most fired up series that we could possibly get out of this entire playoff format. And that's looking at the 8 teams. And even if we split it out to the original 16, I don't know if it would get any better. I think that would be the best matchup to just bring a lot of emotion to the table. That's for sure. It's definitely up there with Dodgers Yankees, Dodgers Astros. Those would probably be the two that I would most want to see. Would be fun. I'm going to stay with the Yankees because I have an interesting thought process on this. Now, the Yankees are going to be one that are going to bring in a lot of ratings no matter what. So, I understand that people are probably like, hey, why don't you pick the Astros, A's, and Rays? I get it. We'll talk about the A's and the Rays in a little bit. But the Yankees are just going to be a massive draw, and there's a lot of storylines with a lot of these teams. And one that I think is so unlikely to happen, but man, would it be fun, is a Marlins-Yankees World Series. And now stick with me here. Hold on a bit, because you're probably just like, Marlins, what are you talking about? I have my reasons. The history of the Marlins. 2 playoff appearances, 2 World Series. One of those World Series was a victory over the New York Yankees in 2003. It was an upset. It was a big-time upset. I don't think many people thought that the Marlins were going to win that. the funny thing about it, the losing team, the Yankees, outscored the Marlins 21-17 in the series, but they lost. They lost 4-2. That Yankees team won 101 games. Marlins winning 91. I love this story because of the guy that ties both of these teams together now. And that's Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter, the captain, the long-time captain of the New York Yankees. There's been lots of stories about how that World Series loss really irked him, really bothered him. There had been rumored stories of that World Series championship that was near his office in Miami is now not near his office because he couldn't stand seeing it every day. It bothered him. But now we're flipping the script for you. You're a part of that Marlins team going against your former Yankees. That is a fun storyline right there in itself. And I can get fully behind that one. I really do wonder how that would be received because you got to think that, I know it. He's in the Marlins organization, so he wants the Marlins to win. Don't kid yourself. I understand that. But he gets there with a young team he helped build, bring in some guys, and now you got to do it against your former squad where all your success happened. It's a fun story. It's a fun story, and I'd be all for it. And I also would love the continuing of the Marlins win the World Series every time they make the playoffs. You just don't get a storyline like that. That doesn't stick around. That doesn't happen. So continuing that on would be a great deal of fun. One last one that I have written down for sure that I would like. So I had Dodgers, Yankees, Dodgers, Astros, Marlins, Yankees, Braves, Yankees. I wanted to get the Yankees out of there. I wanted to get the Dodgers out of there, and I wanted to look at, what are the other teams? What would be some matchups I'd love to see? And an all-California matchup of Padres-A's. These are two teams that almost feel like they're going to get pushed to the wayside a little bit, but they were great. I mean, the Padres were phenomenal in the National League. If they were not playing in this format where a 2 seed has to be a 4 through 6, they wouldn't be seeing the Dodgers in round 2. They would not be seeing the Dodgers in round 2 because they had a better record than the Braves. They just got rewarded because they won their division. They were so good that it just feels like we don't give them enough credit how good they were. 37-23 was the third best record in the MLB this year. The third best. It isn't talked about enough. And then when you go to the American League, it's the same idea with Oakland. We're talking about the Rays, we're talking about the Yankees a lot. And the Astros are kind of taking it to Oakland a little bit. They had a great season. They really did. Now losing Chapman hurt them a lot. That's one of their best players. But they're still a really good team. And so I do want to give a little credit. An all-California matchup would be great, especially when you consider the fact these Padres-A's games were really good in the regular season. They were exciting and fun to watch. And so bring me a matchup that I've already seen in the regular season. I know it was good. I could continue to watch it again. I would be all for it. I would be all for it. So those are some of the ones that I had for sure written down that I think would be fun and exciting to watch. And now Tampa Bay Rays fans, don't get angry at me. I know there's some Rays fans that'd be like, hey, what about us? I wouldn't mind seeing the Rays in the postseason. I've bet on this hill before. They may not be the most exciting team in baseball. It doesn't mean they're not a good team in baseball. They have great pitching. They have a lot of great players. They're going to get better in the future because their farm system is loaded as well. But there's other draws. There's other draws that pull me. But I'm not going to complain about the Rays if they make it. Rays, Dodgers, Rays, Padres, Rays, Braves, any of those would be exciting just because I know that their pitching is so good. Let's bring in one of those great offenses. So, I could write any of those 3 down. I could get behind any of those series. That would be a lot of fun to watch. And, the Braves fans, I could see you'd be like, hey, why are you knocking us so much as well? I could get behind your offense as well. We talked about that a little bit with Braves, Yankees. I could get behind your offense being there. I really do. There's a lot of different storylines that I could watch in the postseason, and I'm not going to complain. I'm just giving a list of some of them that I think I would find a little more exciting or intriguing as we get into the World Series. Just my thoughts on all of that. So that's going to be it for some potential dream World Series matchups. We'll put it at that. Maybe not best, but dream World Series, at least for me. We got one segment left, and we got to talk about a fun tweet that I saw over the weekend having to do with if teams were allowed to claim players in series they just won. We'll talk about that a little bit more here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast after a quick break.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
All right, so let's make sure that we have the setup here, and let's make sure that we explain this well. I know this can be a little tricky to understand if it's not explained really well, so I'm going to try my best to go about this. Over the weekend, I saw a tweet from Jeremy Frank. If you aren't familiar, he's a great follow. He has a lot of interesting baseball stats, a lot of very unique stats. Man, when the guy is followed by Jason Stark, that usually means you're putting out some good baseball content. So they're right there plugging him a little bit. Give him a follow. He's always got something good. But he had a discussion. He goes, hey, this might be lame, but at least it's interesting and fun to talk about. If a team won a series, so let's take, for example, the Dodgers just beat the Brewers. Every time that a team won a series, when they move on, what would they do? Who would they claim if they were allowed to take one player from the team that they just played? And I went, wow, that is a fun conversation. That is a fun idea. And then he gave his 8. And a lot of them I agreed with. I had a couple that I'd be, I could go a different direction with some of these. But I thought it was interesting to bring up. And like I said, my list is very comparable to his. But I do want to bring it up and talk about this because it's just a fun debate. I think it would be fun. I played in a baseball league in which we had something kind of similar to this. When you qualified for the playoffs, you were able to bring one player onto your team if they were in your league. It's a similar thing. And it didn't play a major, massive role for that series. But at the same time, we're not in the MLB. So there's a reason it wasn't as big of a deal. It could be a lot of fun to see some of these teams just claim a player. And some of these are just perfect fits, match made in heaven. Some other ones are an interesting discussion because you can't just look at a team and go, okay, who's your best player? There we go. Give them to me. Because you might have depth, or you might have someone already great at that position, or maybe your whole outfield is great and you really don't need that player. You need somebody else. You need a closer. You need starting pitching. You need someone behind the plate. There's a lot of different ways you could go with this. And so I wrote down my own list here from each series. And I wanted to talk about it and put it out there. And it's a fun discussion. You could have this with other friends and see where it goes. So I'm going to start things off with the American League. I always like to start off with the American League. And right away, our number 1 seed, Tampa Bay. If they were to beat Toronto, which they did, and they get to then pick one player, who would that be? Now, I look at Tampa Bay's team. Their starting pitching, solid. Their bullpen, solid. Offense overall, pretty good, very flexible. They would probably try to boost their offense a little bit, and they would look at Toronto's team and go, okay, who do you have offensively that has been here all year, has been there? And something I should point out as well, they have to have played in that series. have to have played. If they did not play, not qualified for this. And I think the easy decision for them, at least in my mind, would have to be Teoscar Hernandez for the Blue Jays. Now, there's two guys on their team that really were offensive steady guys throughout the year, and Gurriel and Hernandez. But Hernandez was more of the better player for him. Batted .289 on the year, 16 home runs, 34 RBIs. Bring a little offensive pop to your team. I think that would be the guy that I would want to claim. Try to boost your offense in any way possible. So that one felt like a very easy decision. There's going to be quite a few of these, I feel like, that are easy. But there's definitely some that are willing to be debated. So the Rays get a little offensive help. They would claim in this fake scenario Teoscar Hernandez. The next series, the 2 beating the 7, Oakland just taking down Chicago, the White Sox. Here was probably the first one where I thought, this could go a couple different ways. Some starting pitching help would be big for Oakland. Their bullpen's strong, their defense is strong. Starting pitching could be helpful. I can see them going for Giolotto. Maybe you believe more in Keuchel. Obviously, whichever one you prefer. I could understand that discussion. But I look at this team and one that they had lost Chapman as an offensive bat. We may not know where their offensive consistency is coming from game to game. How about we take a guy that absolutely destroyed you in the playoffs? He was good and was pretty darn good to boot in the regular season as well. And you could play him at first base, you could play him at DH, totally your choice. But I think Jose Abreu would be the pick for me from the White Sox to go on. .317 batting average, 19 home runs, 60 RBIs, 987 OPS. He might be our American League MVP this year. Definitely going to get a lot of votes. I think Abreu would be the pick. And this is one of those situations where I think that White Sox, you can pluck a lot of guys. Maybe they want to go Tim Anderson and play him in the infield. And they got Marcus Semien, so that's a tough one. They got La Stella at second base. Maybe they trust one of those guys to move to third, but then you take away Pinder. It's a tough one. That one is hard. But I think if it was me, I would get to take Jose Abreu. That would have been my decision. The next one that I think 3 seed would have been Minnesota, but they got taken down by Houston. Who are they going to pluck from the Twins? Now, I wanted very badly, very, very badly, to give them Nelson Cruz just because Cruz has been phenomenal, and I just want him to move on and keep going. I mean, the 40-year-old batted over 300. He had 16 home runs, 33 RBIs. He was great. But offense wasn't the thing I thought they were going to need. If Astros are going to move on anyways, they're going to get offense from a lot of different guys. They needed pitching help. And so you have to look at Jose Berrios. You have to consider him. But I think the decision ultimately has to be Kenta Maeda, who had a phenomenal season for the Twins, going 6-1, 2.70 ERA, 80 strikeouts, .75 WHIP. He was great for the Twins, and you're giving that reliable starter back to an Astros team that is down Verlander, and now you have Greinke, Maeda as your top 2 starters. I think that's the move I would do if I was having to pluck someone off of Minnesota's team to give to Houston. And then the last one in the American League, I saved this one last because this is one of those that you don't even need to discuss. It's not hard. You know the Yankees' offense is good, and there really isn't much that you're going to want to take from the Indians' offense, team they knocked off. We could talk about Ramirez. We can maybe talk about Lindor if you really wanted to. But there's kind of this Cy Young candidate in the American League that would just make New York scarier. They would take Shane Bieber. They would run that claim in, smile all the way back, and go, yep, we now have a two-headed monster of Garrett Cole and Shane Bieber moving forward. Maybe it was a good thing that we didn't win our division. We got Bieber right away. See, that's what makes this situation fun. Some of these teams, just based on who they matched up against, would get a fun claim. So that's what I would go with if this fake situation. Tampa Bay would take Teoscar Hernandez from Toronto. Yankees take Shane Bieber from Cleveland. Houston takes Kenta Maeda from Minnesota. Oakland takes Jose Abreu from Chicago if they got to claim someone. Going over to the National League, we'll start off with our 1 seed, the Dodgers. Now, if it was a normal season, they'd probably consider Christian Yelich, but hey, Yelich wasn't that great this year. Just call it is what it is. Their bullpen, they could look at Josh Hader. They really could. I think their bullpen's pretty solid. Not to say that Hader wouldn't help them, but they have a pretty dang good bullpen right now. Some consistency on a starting pitcher, a guy that could maybe pitch 2 games for you in a series, get upwards to 10 innings, maybe more. I think a quality starter to help them out, to complement everything they have, I think the move would be Brandon Woodruff. I can't knock you if you go Hader. I can't knock you. That's your decision. But I think bringing in somebody to help them, give them another starter that's going to be quality innings. I think Woodruff would be the move. When it comes to quality starts on the season outside of Kershaw, the Dodgers weren't getting a ton of those to begin with. Now they have a lot of guys that are promising. Walker Buehler, obviously, Dustin May. But Woodruff is a guy that he even came up and he towed up against the Dodgers, and he looked pretty solid for a lot of that game. And when he's on his game, he is a top-level pitcher. And it's something else you got to look at when you make these decisions. You're not picking these guys to slump or underperform. You're not saying, well, what's the worst I'm going to get? No, you make these decisions on thinking, if I get the best of this player, is it going to help me? And I just think there's a lot of value in getting a top starter added to your team, because if your starter's able to eat those innings earlier on, they take some relief off of your bullpen, and they ultimately help your bullpen. And Woodruff's another guy that, hey, maybe he doesn't start the first 2 games. He starts game 3, and you don't use him in game 5, or he's not starting game 5. Doesn't mean you can't bring him out of the bullpen and use him in a spot to match up. So I would lean Woodruff in this situation. That's where I would go. Looking at our 2 seed, Atlanta, man, this one, it's just who you play. This works out beautifully. They beat Cincinnati. There's not many that I'm thinking they're looking up and down the roster for Cincinnati, because there's an easy decision, and it's just the best decision. The Braves would love more starting pitching as well. Hey, Trevor Bauer, we would pick you. Both of our potentially Cy Young winners would get picked and be moving on in this scenario. I think that one is just too easy, makes too much sense. It's just like Shane Bieber going to the Yankees. They would grab him, run away, and be happy with the decision and not think twice about it. So Bauer would be in our fake scenario, our claimed player going to the Braves. Now, Miami. This is one that I thought one way on the weekend, think a different way today. If you would have asked me over the weekend who would Miami claim from Chicago, I would have told you Darvish. Give me a third starter. I'm rolling out Alcantara, Sixto Sanchez, Darvish, back-to-back-to-back games. Yes, please. I'm feeling confident. But then the news came down that Starling Marte is not going to play. And I go, ooh. That's some offensive production from my center field that I am missing. So I think I'm going to change gears here. And I would go look at what offense I can get from the Cubs, particularly in the outfield. And the guy that performed really the best for them all year would probably be Ian Happ. I think I would be bringing Ian Happ on. And it's hard to pass over Darvish as well, because he is a Cy Young candidate as well. Been great. But with Marte not being there, a decision kind of needs to be made. Happ, batting .260, 12 home runs, 28 RBIs. Do what you can to help your offense out. I think that's the way I would lean. And that one's tough. Out of all 8 teams, that one really was the hardest one to claim because talking myself out of Darvish was not easy to do. Just not easy to do. And then my last team, San Diego, plucking from St. Louis. If we were taking best player, we'd want to take Goldschmidt. That's best player. That's taken away. I couldn't knock you on that one at all. That one makes sense. Make a scary offense scarier. Clevenger coming back also makes you think about Goldschmidt a little bit more. And I understand. Like, I totally get it. But I'm going to try to help their starting pitching as much as I can. As much as I possibly can. And I think we have to look at Flaherty. Get the best possible starter to this team. Try to slow down who they play. Let the offense work the rest of the way. Let the offense work the rest of the way. So I think it was just, it makes too much sense. Give me Jack Flaherty, a top-end guy. Maybe didn't have the best season, 4-3, 4.91 ERA. But I know if I'm getting his best, I might have an ace. And that helps me propel into the next future rounds. I really do think that's the way I have to go. And you really have to look at these teams and think about it. What am I doing? Am I going for my best possible player, or am I going for something that's going to help me out? I could even see someone making a decision to go with Kwang Hyun Kim, who had a great season for the Cardinals. I understand that decision as well. But I'm leaning more towards Flaherty in this call, and so that's who I'm going to go with for the Cardinals. So my National League, I'd have the Dodgers taking Woodruff, Padres taking Flaherty, Miami taking Ian Happ just over Yu Darvish, and then Atlanta would take Trevor Bauer from Cincinnati. So those would be my claims if the winning team in a series got to take another player on to the next round. It's fun. That could be a heated discussion. It really can be. And I could see it going a lot of different ways. It's fun to definitely talk about. But that's going to be it for me here in this episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you again for listening. It means a great deal every time you step in, download, listen. Helps us out a great deal. It would be even better as well if you can help out. Leave a positive review, something you like about the show, something you've seen, maybe something you want to discuss. Who would you claim off of these players? What are some World Series matchups you would like to see? I'd love to hear back from you guys. Anything else helps us out. So, be great to hear from you. Want to thank you one more time for listening. It means a great deal, whether it be today, tonight, whatever. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, the GSMC Podcast Network.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.